Hello and welcome to part 2 of the Tarnum video. In the last video, I covered the early life of Tarnum and his immortality. And in this one, I'm going to be covering the rest of it. Be covering the rest of the Heroes Chronicle games that I didn't cover in my last video. Those being the World Tree, the Fiery Moon, Clash of Dragons, and then we have also Race for the Sword of... And then I'm also going to be covering his role in the Heroes of Might and Magic 4. So the next part of the chronological timeline for Tarnum, or his life, are the events of the World Tree. Tarnum is woken up in the middle of the night as the ancestor screamed in his head, "Save the World Tree." Tarnum feels compelled to travel northeast, but doesn't know why the ancestors don't call him before them, like they usually do. He finds the barbarian tribes being attacked by necromancers. Tarnum defeats the necromancer and learns that the necromancer wants to destroy the World Tree, as the World Tree represents all life, which is why the necromancer wants to destroy it, because they hate life apparently. With the help of the barbarian tribe, Tarnum eventually defeats the nearby necromancers, allowing him to head deeper into the caves. While searching for the World Tree, Tarnum is faced with a unified army of necromancers who's also searching for the World Tree. The necromancer was also joined with a group of barbarians calling themselves followers of Vor. From the shaman Adar, Tarnum learned that Vor was one of the ancestors. A group of barbarians from Krula turned one of their ancient kings into a war god. With reinforcements from the surface, Tarnum managed to defeat the nearby necromancers. Tarnum and the barbarian tribe come across a large cavern with trees, grass, and flowers, despite the fact that they are deep underground and there's no sunlight or rain here. Tarnum has found the World Tree, but he's eventually attacked once again by the followers of Vor. Tarnum eventually learned that the followers of Vor is led by a barbarian named King Targor. King Targor patterned himself on being the mythical barbarian tyrant who destroyed the wizard kings of Bracadun. Tarnum wants to use the pendant of Total Recall to show King Targor the reality of his time as the barbarian tyrant, hoping that facing fact will stop the followers of Vor. Grumba has found the pendant and sent a goblin to Tarnum to tell him where to find it. After meeting up with Grumba, Tarnum puts the pendant of Total Recall and goes to face King Targor. After viewing Tarnum's memories and discovering where his action has taken him, King Targor realized the foolishness of trying to copy the barbarian tyrant. He left to tell Vor that he wouldn't worship anymore, but didn't return. Vor left the World Tree, but even without their leader, the necromancers still attempted to destroy it. Tarnum went forth and defeated them to save the tree. The next event of Heroes Chronicles is the Fiery Moon, which takes place immediately after the World Tree. While the necromancer has been defeated and the World Tree was safe, Vor was still out there and the rest of the ancestors were nowhere to be seen. Tarnum decided to follow Vor, and he could sense that the mad ancestor had fled northeast. Tarnum tracked down a small camp of demons who had killed some of his goblins, and single-handedly wiped them out while some of his men watched. Emboldened by this feat, the men destroyed their infernal enemies. As he followed Vor's trail, Tarnum realized that the demons that kept getting in his way weren't there by coincidence, but actually working for Vor. He needed to fight his way through them to follow the mad ancestor. Some of Tarnum's soldiers found a wounded familiar and brought him to Tarnum, who then sent for healers. Tarnum would eventually learn that the familiar was called Skissix. Skissix claimed to be dead and knew that Tarnum was the immortal hero. He'd been working for Vor on the Fiery Moon, where Vor was keeping the other ancestors imprisoned. After Skissix told him this, Tarnum worked out that that was the cause of the distant cry that had woken him up and urged him to save the World Tree. Grumba, the ogre that served Tarnum as second in command, suspected that the familiar was a spy, as did the shaman Vern. Tarnum didn't agree, but wasn't willing to trust Skissix either. In order for Tarnum to reach the Fiery Moon, he needed to travel through the sparkling bridge. Unfortunately, the elemental guardians refused him to let him pass, and he had to fight through their armies. While Tarnum is fighting the elemental guardians' armies, he had a near-death experience after fighting a air elemental, as it felt like he got stabbed with a blade. If it weren't for Skissix jumping for one of the air elementals, this would have been the death of, well, Tarnum. Tarnum thanked Skissis for saving his life, and the familiar told him that familiars and barbarians couldn't be friends, so he decided to be a barbarian instead. Tarnum began to wonder if his immortality was tied towards the ancestors. After passing through the sparkling bridge, Tarnum finds himself on the Fiery Moon. The Fiery Moon is a dead world, almost devoid of life, destroyed and turned into a volcanic wasteland by demons, some unknown time ago. Seeing what the demons turn anything they take over into, and knowing that they're going to do the same with his world, Tarnum swears that I will never let them come through. As the protection of the ancestors no longer holds the years back, Tarnum suddenly starts to age. His joints ache, his hair turns grey, and he needs to be helped onto his horse. He considers killing himself, but Vern, the shaman, points out that without the ancestors, no barbarian will ever reach paradise ever again, and if Tarnum dies, so does any hope of saving them. After defeating Siron on the battlefield, Tarnum frees the ancestors from their magical prisons. The ancestor gives Tarnum a vial of sap from the World Tree, which could cure Vor's insanity. Tarnum was sent out to battle, but the mad ancestors was more powerful than they realized, and he killed most of Tarnum's army, including his second-in-command Grumba and the shaman Vern. With most of Tarnum's commanders dead, the familiar acted as his second-in-command, and Tarnum met him every night to discuss their progress. Skixis wanted to slay Vor, cause that's what barbarians do best, but Tarnum wondered whether that was all they were, or all they would ever be. Whether his action as the barbarian titan had tainted the bloodline forever. Vor visited Tarnum in his dream, promising him eternal life if he would serve him. Tarnum promised to kill him, but Vor said that he would slay himself as well. Tarnum realized that his fate was tied to the ancestors. If he killed Vor, he would also kill the other ancestors and himself. But he wasn't convinced that wasn't the better outcome. In the end, once his army had defeated Vor and the ancestor was dying at his feet, Tarnum gave him the sap that cured his wounds and restored his sanity. The next chronological appearance of Tarnum is in Clash of the Dragons. In Clash of the Dragons, the continuity is a bit weird since the game itself takes place after Masters of the Element, while the story aspect takes part after the Fiery Moon, which essentially just means that the World Tree and the Fiery Moon are just pretty much ignored by this game. After his adventure in Brakada, Tarnum has lived a rather long time and has taken refuge with dragons and elves. Dragons would eventually disappear, and the ancestors asked him to figure out why they disappeared. Tarnum sends his foster child, Warjack, to Adarine, while he goes to the Elf King to get the mission to find the dragons. Tarnum is tasked with finding the Dragon Talker, an ancient elf who lives with the dragons. After fighting off forces that attacked elven farms nearby, he located the Dragon Talker being attacked by green dragons. After the Dragon Talker is saved by Tarnum, he tells them that the dragons are being controlled. Tarnum learns that the dragons are being controlled by Mutare. Valita, one of the Elf King's captains, suggests that they should find the vial of dragon's blood, a artifact that might help free the dragons. Valita and her forces would disappear after they started to look after this artifact. A Krigan stands in front of Tarnum from getting the vial, and Tarnum would eventually defeat his foe and frees Valita, who was taken prisoner by Khalid, imprisoned in the Pit Fiend's prison. After getting the vial, they realize that it's effective in freeing dragons that are under the control, but it would take a long time to track them down. So they decided to find the Gold Dragon Mothers, 10 of the most powerful dragons who were the ancestors of the Gold and Green Dragons. This is under the idea that if they are free, their descendant will also be freed. On the way to find the Dragon Mothers, they receive more ambushes, so this makes it so that there might be a spy in the ranks. Tarnum learns that Mutare has control over Rush Dragons, and the Dungeon Overlord sets up a base near the border of Avli. Tarnum marches out to deal with this threat. After the battle, Tarnum starts to worry about this spy and believes that Captain Valida is the spy and sends his advisor, Aspen, to investigate who the spy is. Dragons attack Arafia, and Avli sends soldiers to help their allies, and Tarnum is there to help as well. With the help of Knight Sorsha, Tarnum manages to drive away the armies of Nihon. To stand up against Mutari's dragons, Tarnum tries to ally himself with the fairy dragons. During their attempts to recruit the dragons, Aspan figures out who the spy is and turns out to be Kerbon. A friend of Valida, Kerbon eventually kills Aspen and flees. Tarnum manages to convince the dragons to join. Tarnum now decides to attack Mutari's forces and drive them out of Avli, but unfortunately, Mutari controls Azure dragons now. With the help of fairy dragons, Tarnum pushes back the forces of Mutari to Nihon. A final fight with Mutari occurs. Mutari flees the battle after seeing that it's clearly not going her way and flies away to Nihon. Tarnum lives with the elf until the ancestor takes him back. The next appearance that Tarnum makes is in Race of the Sword of Frost. A old prophecy foretold that if the Sword of Frost and Armageddon's blade ever met, it would mean the end of the world. To stop this from happening, Gelu, wielder of Armageddon's blade, sets out to find the Sword of Frost. Despite the elf's intention, if Gelu found the weapon, the world could be doomed. Tarnum couldn't talk Gelu out of his mission and realized that he had to use force. After Mutari's death, the land was in chaos as her generals battled each other for control, and Tarnum knew that if he conquered them all, he would have an army large enough to stop Gelu. As his victory over the other overlords drew near, Tarnum learned that Gelu had set sail to the lands of the Vori elves. Tarnum prepared some ships, and when he secured his rule over Nihon, he sailed after the stubborn elf. When Tarnum arrived in Vori, he found that Vori elves were waiting for him. Since Gelu was half Vori, they considered him one of their own, and they were trying to stop Tarnum from following him. Tarnum needed to defeat them to reach the Sword of Frost first. As Tarnum marched against his foes, he was suddenly shot by one of his own Medusas. The creature wanted to kill him and take control of his army, but he was saved by three beholders, Nis, Sarm, and Killick. Nis learned the treacherous Medusa that had been slain had 10 hatchlings that were plotting against them. Tarnum and the beholders ambushed the Medusas, and while Sarm died in the battle, so did the Medusas. After defeating the Vori defenders, Tarnum could finally follow Gelu. While following Gelu, Tarnum learned that there was a group of barbarians nearby as well. Tarnum hoped to build an alliance with them, but learned from a messenger that Kija, the third wife of Kilgore, was there to bring her husband the Sword of Frost, so that her sons would be named his heirs. The messenger told Tarnum that if he got in the way, he'd be tortured. Tarnum broke the messenger's nose and arm and sent him back, telling him to inform Kija that he would do what he wanted. Kija declared war on Tarnum, which meant that now he had two enemies in the north, neither of which he wanted to kill. He didn't want to slay his own people, and he had grown to love the elves as well. Kilkeek suggested that to strike at Gelu, they should capture someone close to him. Tarnum hoped that if they did, Gelu might slow down on his march towards the sword, and he might be put off guard and start to make mistakes as well. After clearing the Vori elves of his path, Tarnum could follow Gelu once more. The battle against Kija's barbarians slowed Tarnum down, and he feared that he wouldn't be able to catch up to Gelu. To strengthen his force, Tarnum decided to enlist the aid of the Azure dragons. When he prepared to search for their lair, he learned that the barbarians had circled around him and were again blocking his path. Kija had gained the ability to manufacture crystal dragons, and Tarnum knew that he would have to face these powerful beasts in battle. Nis had been trying to find out which one of Galu's friends they should capture, and they settled for Ufritin, a ranger that joined the forest guard at the same time as the half-Vori. Tarnum knew Ufritin, who was a brave fighter and a good person, and cursed the ancestor for making him do this. After dealing with the barbarians and their crystal dragons, Tarnum strengthened his army with the powerful Azure drakes. Tarnum and his troops moved fast to catch up with Gelu, but Galu's friend, Ufritin, prepared an ambush and caught him unaware. After nearly crippling Tarnum's army, Ufritin pulled back and gave him the opportunity to surrender. Instead, Tarnum decided to dig in and rebuild his forces underground. Tarnum told that he hired a new bodyguard, Trongar, a massive black Minotaur king. Kill realized that Tarnum was twice as powerful as before. With the power of his army, Tarnum defeated Ufritin's forces and captured the dwarf. Once again, Tarnum's forces followed Gaelu's trail, and the trail led to a tunnel that goes beneath a glacier. Bringing the Neon troops into that environment felt more familiar to them. Salissa, the leader of the Medusas, discovered that Kija's barbarians has also reached the area and could use the tunnels for ambushes. Trongar suggested that if they hit the barbarians hard enough, the tunnels wouldn't matter. Tarnum asked if Ufritin could talk Gaelu into giving up on his quest, but the dwarf told Tarnum that Gaelu was going to Voli, an ancient lost Vori elf city that was where he found the Sword of Frost. After dealing with Kija's troops, Tarnum could follow Gaelu's trail once again. As Tarnum headed deeper into the glacier, looking for the entrance to Voli, he discovered that Kija had led her barbarians here as well. Tarnum decided to deal with her once and for all. After paying some barbarians, the deserters, for information, he learned that Kija was looking for the Ring of Infinite Gems, the only object that could open the passage to the hidden city. Kija sent a goblin messenger to Tarnum, offering an alliance. She told him that he could keep both the islands of Vori and all the loot, asking only for the Sword of Frost. Tarnum knew he couldn't accept this. They told the soldiers that Kija was trying to trick them. After battling his way through Kija's armies, Tarnum found Ufritin, who had realized the truth of his words and tried to convince Gaelu to turn back. He was unsuccessful, so he stole the Ring of Infinite Gems from him to bring to Tarnum, but had to hide from Kija's barbarians. With the ring, Tarnum could follow Gaelu into the passage of Voli. As he and Gaelu communicated through letters, Tarnum attempted to talk to Gaelu out of his mission, but Gaelu told him that he would not stop until he had destroyed the Sword of Frost, not change in his way, and asked Tarnum to either join him or stay out of his way. Tarnum learned that Kija had escaped from her dungeon prison. Since she was alone and wouldn't be able to go back to Kilgore and get a new army in time, he decided it didn't matter. One night, Tarnum prayed to the ancestor for guidance, and they appeared before him. He asked whether he should destroy the sword, but they told him that the Sword of Frost could only be destroyed by the Armageddon's blade, and bringing the swords together could endanger the world. Instead, one of them added that the ancestor would cast it into a place where no one would ever find. Tarnum apologized for everything he has done as an overlord while searching for the blade, or the Sword of Frost. But they told him that he had nothing to apologize for. Tarnum was doing what is best for all. Even if a deed is disgusting to you, that is true honor. We cannot fault you for that. But when he finally defeated both Gaelu and the defenders of Voli, he discovered that Kija had already taken the sword, planning to take it back to her husband. This would eventually lead to the events of the Reckoning, the very thing that Tarnum tried to prevent, the destruction of Enroth. The next time Tarnum appears in the ancient history is in Heroes of Might and Magic 4. Tarnum only appears to give him life advice at the beginning of East Mission in the campaign series, Uniting the Tribes. Kinda like this.
I know you don't understand it now, Werjack, but someday you will. Yes, we are barbarians. Yes, we are born warriors. But a warrior is not just a killer. He's a protector. You must have respect for life, and an even greater respect for your ability to take it. Otherwise, you're just a murderer.
And that should be everything about Tarnum. Since he doesn't make an appearance in the newer timeline, I'm not going to be talking about it. So if you made it this far, like and subscribe. And I'm probably going to be making more of a personal video. Maybe rank in my favorite factions, starting with Heroes of Might and Magic 3, since that's a game that I've been heavily looking into playing. So see you all next time.